Now, the holiday season is almost over, so it's time to bring back one of Breakfast's regular segments, and that is the Friday Confab.
This week has been bookended by sad deaths of music legend David Bowie on Monday, and this morning a giant of the acting world, Alan Rickman.
Cancel the kitchen scraps for lepers and orphans. No more merciful beheadings. And call off Christmas.
Great scene there from Prince of Thieves.
Absolutely. Now, here for the first of our weekly confabs in 2016 is Susan Carland from Monash University and Forbes columnist and author Margie Warrell. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Yeah. Let's start with this idea of this global grief that seems to overtake these stories of celebrity deaths. What do you make of that, Margie?
Well, what I think is interesting is the way everyone comes to social media to talk about it now. Social media seems to become the town square, where everyone would gather back in the day to grieve or celebrate. That is what social media now is, and so we can all join the public square from our lounge room, for better or worse, in our pyjamas. And so I didn't post anything on Bowie or on Rickman, but I loved watching what was being said and who said what. I have to say, I didn't realise how much Bowie in particular meant to people. It was really profound.
Yeah.
Margie,
yeah.
what do you think of the
Well, I
grief?
think, David Bowie, I'm a few years older than you, Susan, so I know when I saw the outpouring of, well, not many, but, a few, and David Bowie was just such a huge figure for people who were growing up for me in the 80s during those years of just, Major Tom to Ground Control, all those songs he had. And I think that we feel a little bit of our own history or of a chapter of our life kind of is gone too, when someone that's been so seminal, and while they might not know us, we feel like we know them. And so when they pass, these public figures, he's just one of many, but, I think there is this sense of, part of my youth has gone. And,
for sure,
yeah.
Well, particularly with music and also with movies, those are the things that you remember. You have those flashbacks, particularly when these songs come on the radio.
And
still.
Harry Potter, I think of Snape in Harry Potter, who was such a, I guess, vilified but beloved figure too. So many people have such positive emotion around that. Such a chapter of their lives was Harry Potter. Well, there's such a figure and he's gone and he can never exist again, in the real world. Yeah.
Now I think I've got morningitis, Susan, and I called you Margie. So just to correct my brain fade there. But the other thing I thought was really interesting about the David Bowie story was just the breadth of tributes from all different sorts of music legends. You had, Mick Jagger and you had Madonna and then you had Kanye West. All these different genre of artists coming together to mourn a figure who obviously sort of straddled all sorts of music.
Well, he was so groundbreaking in so many ways. In the same vein as someone like Michael Jackson, he really changed the way people understood music and the role of the musician. What I found interesting as well was to look at the way people spoke about what Bowie did for the conversation around race, for example, when he went on MTV one day and said, "Why have you got no black artists on your show?" And the things that he did for gender, coming out really early as a gay man, and what he did for LGBTI rights in a time when homosexuality had only been decriminalised in the States a few years earlier. So he was a real pioneer in so many ways, not just musically but socially as well.
Do you think it says something about the grieving process that we swing straight to celebrate their lives? Both of these gentlemen were both relatively young, at 69, that we at least try and find something to find that's positive by looking back at their work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, there's almost a distinction between grieving and mourning, because often we think of it as we're grieving them, and grief is often a very personal thing. We feel intense grief when someone we genuinely love dies. Sometimes it's less grief than it is this public display of mourning. I don't know that, I wouldn't cry over their deaths, but I might feel just mournful in a public way, and that's why people go onto social media. So I think
a lot of music
subtlety
journalists were crying.
Yeah, right, okay.
So I found that really stunning, actually, that they could feel that level of personal loss.
Grief,
I found
and
that
I think
part
Bowie,
of the...
to your point, had such a profound impact. He really was a trailblazer.
Yeah.
He was very courageous in how he forged his own life and what he did. So I think he particularly had a big impact on many people. Yeah.
All right, well, there's obviously been many other things dominating the headlines this week, but something that you both particularly were interested in, I think, is this story about the unprecedented number of phone calls to Lifeline.
Yeah.
And also the pointing out that it may have something to do with social media, in that we're spending so much time looking at our peers in photographs, usually lovely photographs on, say, on Facebook, for instance, and then having our feelings of isolation and ineptitude to sort of...
Margie, you've written specifically about this, haven't you?
Yeah, I have written about this because there's been some research now for a few years that shows that, you know, the rise of social media, we spend more and more time online, and we're more connected online than ever, but more disconnected from the communities that we live in, from just the people right around us. And what's most interesting is, you know, there's numerous studies, one by the American Psychological Society, that found that the highest reportings of loneliness were in people 18 to 35. Those who you wouldn't expect it from, you might think of it as more elderly people. So those who are spending the most time online have the highest reporting of feeling depressed. People who spend more time on Facebook are more likely to feel depressed. And that's regardless of whether they're making positive comparisons to others or negative, whether they think they're doing better than others or worse. They still feel less happy than those who are just not as online as much and are just getting out and living their lives. So I think there's a real challenge for all of us in our lives. You know, Facebook, etc., it's our highlight reel. We don't put up all the rotten stuff. We only want to put up the good stuff. But we do have this tendency to look and go, oh, they're at a party, she looks fantastic, they've just done a triathlon. And
their children are geniuses.
Really careful. I mean, I would just say to anyone who's struggling with feeling down, you know, get off that and connect into the people around you, because
the real world.
There's so much we know from positive psychology that one of the key reasons for well-being is when we are connected to the people around us, our strong personal relationships, and you can't really be doing that if you're just sitting there all the time watching how many people are reposting and tweeting what you've put out there.
Susan, what do you reckon?
Well, it's interesting because our photos have always been a highlight reel. Like, if you look back at Mum and Dad's photo album from many years ago, they didn't take photos of here's the messy kitchen, here's me having a crap day. It was here's the wedding, here's your graduation. So that's human nature, I think, that our photos are always the highlight reel. The problem is now that everyone's is up online for us all to see, so we're always seeing the great moment, so we compare the great moment or the highlight reel of other people with our own crappy lives. Even people's photos, they're all filtered as well. It's not even, here's a great situation, here's my great situation with the filter and everything's clarified and I've cropped out that ugly person that ruined the shot. And we have to force ourselves, I think, to have some perspective and realise that this is someone's curated life. And we do it ourselves. We're all guilty as well. And in the same way that you wouldn't look at a museum exhibition and think, well, that's a house, neither is the curated highlight reel the reality either.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Good to see you both.
Yes.
Here's to a great year
Happy
ahead.
New Year. Here's to a good 2016. And
Yes, and everybody.
get on Facebook.
Let's all take a selfie now.
And keep tuning into the Friday Confab. And we'll see you
Indeed.
again.
Thank you.